It's been a while since I've done a film review. The film I want to discuss is a film from 2005, a British film, The Girl in the Cafe. This film is interesting because it actually coincided with an actual event that was going on the same year, which was the G8 summit in Gleneagles in Scotland. That year, the UK was hosting the G8. Of course, this is a rotationary system. Um, I remember being particularly interested in the events of the time. I went to the big Make Poverty History concert, Live 8 in London, organised by Sir Bob Geldof, among others. It was even bigger in scale than the Band Aid Live 8 concert of 1985. Um, so that period, July 2005, 13 years ago, there was enormous focus around the Make Poverty History campaign and the issues around it. There was also big demonstrations in Edinburgh as well as those in London. So this film it's a love story in a sense. It's about a relationship between an introverted, shy, middle-aged man who is played by Bill Nighy, and he is an assistant, a secretary to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and a young woman of whom we know very little, at least in the beginning of the film, played by Kelly MacDonald. And they basically meet in a cafe. And like I say, he's quite introvert and shy by nature, so he's not really used to, um, you get the impression he's not used to relationships with women. But basically, he invites her to come along with him to the G8 summit in Iceland. Um, that's a little bit of artistic license because generally speaking, G8 summits are within the country where they're being hosted, whereas this obviously Iceland is. I think it was chosen because it's well known for summits. So the film was written by Richard Curtis of Four Weddings and a Funeral fame and directed by David Yates, who I think also had connections with the Harry Potter films. Um, it's an interesting film. It's an unusual film whereby you have a love story amidst the backdrop of a political summit. Um, I would say it's quite an interesting film. I quite enjoyed it, but there's a few points of critique which I would agree with, which the critics pointed out. Firstly, there's no issue with the acting. I mean, it was great performances from Bill Nighy, Kelly MacDonald, and Ken Stott, who played the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Um, and basically, gradually, you see Bill Nighy explain what's happening to Kelly MacDonald. He's saying, well, we're trying to alleviate extreme poverty, we're trying to cancel debt, all these big important issues that was going on, particularly around that G8 summit in 2005. And she's very conscientious, but she's also a bit spontaneous. So several points in the film, a bit kind of awkward. Where she kind of questions the Chancellor without warning Bill Nighy. First, she kind of puts him on the spot at one point with the German finance minister, and then she actually interrupts the big dinner with all the world leaders sitting there, and it becomes a security issue. Um, Now, there was a deleted scene. I've just watched the deleted scene, and it's a pity they got rid of that because I think it would have been a bit more realistic where Bill Nighy actually confronts her and he says, "Are you a plant? What are you doing here?" Like, oh, well, not what are you doing here because he invited her, but what has someone sent you here? Are you some sort of protester, like professional protester or something? Because it's obviously quite. There's one very revealing scene where Ken Stott's character says, "We get into this hotel to get away from lunatic protesters, and you invite one here." And she's attacking the very man who's trying to do something about this. Um, the film certainly thought provoking. I mean, the statistics 30,000 children dying of extreme poverty every day at that time, and I imagine it's still very high now. They're sobering, they really are. But that's part of the problem that the film, more often than not, kind of gave the impression it was preaching a little bit And like I say, it was written by Richard Curtis, who has been very active on anti-poverty campaigns. And there was a few times it felt like it was more like a long advertisement or a long Oxfam appeal or something rather than a feature film. And it's not that the film didn't have its charm. Like I say, superb performances by Nighy and MacDonald. In fact, she won Best Supporting Actress, and let me get this right. Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Miniseries or a Movie. The film also won Outstanding Made for Television Movie, Outstanding Writing for a Limited Series Movie, or Dramatic Special for Curtis. So it won a number of awards. The casting director was Fiona Weir, who was also the casting director of the Harry Potter films. That's the connection with Harry Potter, that's all. But yeah, my critique of the film was it did seem a little bit preachy at points. Another big critique that was made, and which I agree with, is the oversimplification of the issues. Um, I mean, the film talks about, or it goes into how the British delegation was kind of finding these barriers because each of the different delegations was prioritizing other aspects. For example, there was austerity going on in countries, and they were said it's going to be difficult to sell cancelling debt to populations who are dealing with austerity domestically, and so that's realistic. Those are the sort of issues that come about. But it kind of gave the impression, it kind of, had this fairy tale ending whereby, which was often claimed by the campaigners at that time, that eight men in a room can change the world, and or that they can totally alleviate extreme poverty, which is not the case. Um, Certainly, big reforms can be made. The Millennium Development Goals were very ambitious, but I do feel that the film was kind of projecting that very frankly naive idea that world leaders alone can solve these problems because it doesn't take into account, for example, bad governance. It doesn't take into account sovereignty issues and how much exactly developed countries can do. So there's a lot of complexities. I mean, actually, Ken Stott's character at several points, he says, "Young lady, these issues are very complex," or his German counterpart did, and that's true. So they bring that into the dialogue, but they kind of end the film with her narrative, which is, "Oh well, it can all be solved with a signature on a piece of paper," and that's just not the case. So I couldn't help but feel that whilst Kelly MacDonald, she's a great actress, the screenplay was kind of channeling her as kind of preaching these issues a bit. And the backstory was that she has her own kind of background that isn't entirely revealed. She'd actually served prison time, which is again kind of, you have this introvert character, Bill Nighy, he's very shy with women and he's dating a jailbird, but you find out she was in jail because she hurt a man who hurt a child. And then she kind of ends up saying, does it really matter whose child? And I felt that the film felt like too much of a sermon. To be entertaining is the wrong word for the sort of film it is, but it was just too preachy at too many points. It's still a watchable film. I'd say it's the sort of film that's worth checking out, but I did feel it was a little bit too preachy and a little bit. It felt like it was oversimplifying the issues at hand, like the G8 leaders could solve everything. I mean, particularly in 2005, the G8, doesn't have India, it doesn't have China on board. So there's major power players that aren't in the G8 that also matter. Um, in fact, right now, it's not entirely unrelated. I'll just show you. I'm watching Tony Blair talk about defensive globalization and the issues around Brexit. I'll show you briefly. One issue I take with, and I won't go into huge depth with this because this is meant to just be a film review, but one issue I just Googled Edinburgh protest G8, And what came up with the Glen Eagles protest, which was town to the north of Edinburgh, and what actually there was anarchists, attacking police and stuff. It's one of my major issues with those sort of protesters is that they really aren't interested in extreme poverty. They're only interested in making an ass out of themselves. But that's, of course, that's only one aspect of opposition to the G8. Clearly, in the world today, the G8 is less important than it was in 2005. Anyway, check the film out if you can. It's a made-for-TV film, so it may not be. This is a film. I don't know how easy it would be to access, but it's worth watching. I just felt that it was a little bit preachy and overly simplistic in its message. If you have seen it, let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching.